All of them had debt, bondage. Some of them had been shanghaied or kidnapped, essentially, to be brought on board. You know, Lang Long, whenever he wasn't working, he was shackled by the neck. In the case of Thailand, you have the men and boys who are being recruited to come into the country, usually being told that there's a construction job to be had, and they're usually actually ended for the fishing industry. They're not paid a cent. They're paying off their, debt that they accrued coming in the country. The vessel that I focused on had 40 Cambodian crew, all of them between the ages of 13 and maybe 25, and all of them had debt, bondage. Some of them had been shanghaied or kidnapped, essentially, to be brought on board. You work 20-hour days, maybe 6-7 days a week, thousands and thousands of pounds of stacked fish that are partially rotting, just overrun with rats and roaches, and incredibly slippery floor that you kind of have to know how to stay on. And now you think of that floor as being like an elevator that always is going up and down. That's what you're dealing with all the time. So the potential for getting sick or hurt or falling overboard is very real, and it happens all the time. So the threats to these guys are either violence on the part of officers on crew for small, infractions, murder, beatings, etc., or injury and sickness, that if you're 300 miles from shore, they're not going back to bring you to a doctor. You're going to just have to sort of deal with it or die. Lang Long was a Cambodian. He has no clue what he's doing, suffers some pretty severe beatings, and when a supply vessel comes out to pick up some of the fish, Lang Long makes a run for it. He dives overboard, tries to swim to escape. He doesn't succeed, the guys get him back on board, and from then forward for over a year, whenever he wasn't working, he was shackled by the neck. As if that's not sinister enough, it gets really sinister in certain port towns where the men and boys who are on their way to the port are often sort of stored in these apartments or rooms or bunk places above the karaoke bars. And those guys are encouraged to carouse, to have a good time downstairs, drinking and fraternizing with the girls and the women. These guys don't have any money, right? So they're down there thinking that this is just part of the trip, and not realizing that what's actually happening is there's a tab. That debt is added to what is on top of that worker when he gets to the port, and that means he's likely going to be at sea much longer. And so if you boil it all down, you have a situation in which you have trafficked young girls, I use girls meaning 13, 14, being used to further entrap often people from their own country who are also being trafficked. Life is valued differently and less at sea than it is on shore, and especially the lives of deckhands who are migrant workers. They're much cheaper to buy and to sell and to disappear. Big part of the problem here is that the Thai government or other governments in other places where you have sea slavery are often complicit. The closer you get to the front lines, the border police, the port police, these sorts of folks are often underpaid, desperate in their own right, and corrupt, because they're taking bribes from key people to look the other way. And I don't think that retailers, the big supermarkets and that buy the fish, are doing enough to actually force change.